deliberate demise and China's role as new king of the hill. After the catastrophe of September 11, it was evident how many people in this country love and adored the United States of America. We hung flags, cried, rallied together, and showed how much this nation meant to us. With this outpouring of support in mind, let me ask you a question. Why are we allowing politicians, international bankers, and corporate heads to slowly run this country into the grave? These monsters don't have the respect for sovereignty, nationalism, or freedom. In fact, they have contempt for these concepts. To prove this point, did you know that Bill Clinton, while still president in 1997, signed Bill number PDD-60 that says, in case of a nuclear states, we must absorb it and not retaliate or launch on warning. This means we are only allowed to return our own nuclear warheads after our enemy's missiles have already landed on our soil. Think about it. If we can't answer until their nukes hit us, where does that leave our warheads? Sitting ducks ultimately destroyed because we haven't been given a chance to fight back. If the above scenario ever does take place, we're all screwed anyway, so what's it matter? Can you see what's happening? Isn't it obvious there are forces at work within our own country, people who are calling the shots that aren't working in our best interest? I'm going to say it louder and clearer. Unless we do something very soon in a very dramatic fashion, the United States will no longer be the king of the hill. How does this notion settle with you? What if right now we are being replaced as the world's preeminent superpower? Don't think it can happen? Well, what if one of the controllers, after declaring that the New World Order does indeed exist and there's nothing we can do about it, then Constitution and Bill of Rights have been declared null and void? Can't happen? Why not? Think of the assurances and rights that we've been given in this country, the same ones we take for granted on a daily basis. Also consider what a truly remarkable experiment the United States has been. For the first time in history, people actually had legal rights to speak and act freely without being crushed by of an overlord. This population has been able to enjoy the benefits of a middle-class lifestyle. Prior to the founding of this nation, there were primarily two classes, the elite rulers or kings and the lowly serfs or slaves. The lower classes were ultimately forced to spend the majority of their time simply trying to stay alive, raising crops, finding food, maintaining their shelter, and clothing their family. Now we actually have leisure time. We are now in the process of being knocked from our pedestals. Regrettably, when Bill Clinton was president and we enjoyed unparalleled economic success, we were experiencing our fin de siècle, a French word that means the end of an era. The Clinton 90s was our heyday and the end of America's supremacy. And now we're slowly beginning the process of America's deliberate demise. To reinforce this point, take a look at the British Empire. Before we came along, they were the big boys, the Empire, for Pete's sake, militarily, economically, and culturally superior to everyone. But guess what? A bigger fish came along, the United States of America, that held the potential to be economically developed, manipulated, and exploited 1,000 times more than the British. So what happened? The English were deliberately lifted up on the pedestal. Today, ask any American if we can be beaten militarily, economically, or financially. They'd laugh at such a notion. I mean, we are the and the bottom line, profit margins. Right now, with the largest population in the world, China has the potential for future profits. It's scary, but true. Final thing to think about. I was in the woods last week taking a walk with my cats when I came upon a huge anthill. As my cats chased each other through the bushes and climbed trees, I sat there and stared at this anthill, soon coming up with an analogy. I pictured a bunch of different ants living on this mound. The tiny black ones, red piss ants, the creepy looking brown ones, and those real big black ones. They're all contained on this hill. For some reason, there's no way to leave it. Also, they stick and start poking around a little bit. There are also rumors among the ants that if I or any other human wanted to, we could obliterate their entire anthill, either by stomping them to death, dousing them with gasoline and setting them on fire, or drowning them with a hose. In other words, they're living in a very precarious situation. So I'm sitting there watching these ants, and I notice that some of them, the red piss ants, start attacking the brown ones. At the same time, the little black ones try to destroy the big black ones. And they're not just picking on each other, but actually killing each other. The worst part is, they know I'm watching them and how, if I chose, I could stomp them to death. Yet, they keep destroying one another. As the carnage continued, I thought, what a bunch of stupid ants. Then it hit me. How are we any different than those goofy ants? We're doing the same thing they are, and we're human beings. Do you realize that with the technology and resources currently available in our world, there doesn't have to be one person starving anywhere in the world? For your information, nearly 100,000 people die every day of starvation on this planet. We could feed them all if we wanted to. Also, we now possess the technology to completely eliminate the use of fossil fuels that choke our world. In addition, there are also countless diseases that could be cured overnight, and could be all but eliminated. Now, don't get me wrong. Me. I find it hard to believe that adults are actually running this world. Yes, adults. What are we doing? How can you how? It's because of a hidden cabal of evil rulers that long for nothing but utter slavishness from us. Government and then expand their power. What's worse is that the hidden controllers consider themselves beyond responsibility. They don't have to answer to anyone. They feel completely free to do whatever they choose. Are we going to allow them to keep doing so? It's up to us. The Mossad and artificial intelligence. Nearly all the information in this essay comes from Gordon Thomas and his book, Seeds of Fire, China and the Story Behind the Attack on America. I am merely acting as a conduit to bring it to you and to encourage you to purchase this book as quickly as possible. The most explosive book in America right now is Gordon Thomas, Seeds of Fire. It is dangerous plot fomented by the controllers to deliberately undermine America while at the same time enabling China to become the next world superpower. Aided by the Israeli government and especially the Mossad, China is undoubtedly this nation's greatest threat. A plotting, inhuman beast ready to strike at us when we've been sufficiently weakened. Folks, terms possible. Our country is being set up to take a mighty fall, and when our economy and military are stretched to their thinnest points, China is going to storm in and give us a royal ass whipping. Once we're beaten to a pulp and thoroughly defeated, China will reign supreme as the next global king of the hill. The reason I'm writing this review is, I would imagine, Thomas wrote his book and Dandelion published it. We're trying to get this information out to the public before it's too late. And believe me, the wheels are being set in motion to implement a massive shift in world power. I've written before about how the controllers have set their sights on China, viewing it as a huge untapped market waiting to be exploited. Once that happens and America has been knocked from its perch and loses its vaulted position atop the pyramid of control, try to imagine the resulting consequence. Our standard of living will drop, our influence around the globe, and somebody else, an entire race of people that view us with disdain, will be the vehicle through which the controllers will continue to pull their evil shenanigans. In other words, all of the stripped away from us and given to China. Before I get into the actual review of this book, I have to ask you, what will it take to propel us into action before time runs out? The controllers have already leveled the World Trade Centers, and look at what happened when they did. I don't want to minimize the effects of that atrocity, but believe me, that was only the first step. The next time they decide to bring us to our knees, 9/11 was a slap in the face. Stage 2 of their evil plan will be a full-blown knockout punch. Then, what are we going to do? And if you still don't think that hidden forces were behind the WTC attacks, you better start paying attention. The preponderance of evidence is overwhelming. I know people who experienced full-blown depression for at least 3 months after 9/11. How in God's name are they going to cope with an unleashed total assault on our collective consciousness? The effect will be debilitating, if not altogether crippling. I don't know how I have to yell this, but here goes. America, hidden, deliberately laying the groundwork to destroy this great nation. If we don't stop them soon, everything we've earned and come to enjoy will be lost. Okay, let's take a look at Seeds of Fire. A few pages into this book, Mr. Thomas mentions a figure who gained prominence in recent times, Wen-Ho Lee, who was accused of passing defense and nuclear secrets to the Chinese. The only problem was all charges were dropped by U.S. District Court Judge James Parker because, in reality, he was working instead on a program called Project HP that delved into the futuristic concept of holographic portals. Scientists from Los Alamos working at the Lawrence Livermore and Sandia laboratories were pushing the envelope of ET technology, and were trying to make contact with existences beyond those on our planet. Authority on this subject and behavioral scientist with sources at the National Security Agency, Dr. Richard Boylan says that the nuclear secrets mentioned in Lee's case were actually code words for secret advanced technology, such as anti-gravity propulsion and psychotronic remote mind control devices. This type of research goes all the way back to the CIA's infamous MK-Ultra, which we developed after smuggling Nazi scientists into this country via Project Paperclip. After letting them loose to wreak havoc, these evil men ultimately wanted to develop the ability to control people. The Russians then further developed these procedures, which the Chinese are now refining and perfecting. Now, if you're wondering what any China, bear with me. I promise that by the end of this essay, everything will be tied together. Plus, even better, there are new reports surfacing that provide a light at the end of the tunnel and ultimately give us hope. So although the situation facing us is precarious, it's not all gloom and doom. If we pay attention to what's going on, peek through the veil of illusion in this country. With that in mind, let's switch our attention to Area 51 for a moment. As almost everyone knows, this once top secret military base is invariably associated with UFOs and alien technology. And although the government did tinker with reverse technology in the past, for the most part, the little green men scenario has been a smokescreen. What's really going on at Area 51 and other lesser-known installations is artificial intelligence research. In fact, there's even an AI lab in the Dreamland section of Area 51 called S4. In this lab, scientists are experimenting with brain implants in relation to robots in hopes that one day, within this half of the create machines that can actually surpass man via the use of electronic brains. Kevin Warwick, a professor of cybernetics at the University of Reading in England, says with confidence, machines will one day become the dominant life form on Earth. Did you notice that he called machines a life form? So, the big secret at Area 51 and other such places isn't alien intelligence, but artificial intelligence. Warwick continues, the frontiers of space can be seen in a different way when the frailties and limitations of humans are removed. This will be achieved well before 2050. The human race will probably by then be surpassed by a network of intelligent machines that were created by humans. In doing so, these creatures will have orchestrated the destruction of the human race. Now, if all of the above is true, why don't we simply ask Dr. Wen-Ho Lee himself? That's certainly an option, except for one minor detail. In return for being set free and having all charges against him dropped, the government demanded that Lee swear himself to secrecy concerning his research. A convenient little arrangement, don't you think? Since we've mentioned its natural step is to examine the Chinese government's relationship to America's military institutions. If you didn't know it, the CSIS, Chinese Secret Intelligence Service, did penetrate our installation at Los Alamos, but not with Wen-Ho Lee's help. Instead, they us with an intelligence agency of a different sort, Israel's Mossad. Yes, now we're getting into areas that are very touchy and extremely dangerous. In fact, Bobby Ray Inman, former CIA head, described Israel as one of half a dozen countries with a government-directed, orchestrated, and clandestine effort to steal U.S. military and economic secrets. This revelation be true, Israel, the country to which we annually give over $5 billion in foreign aid, our supposed ally, actually spying on and trying to sabotage our nation. Well, it's true, and it gets much worse. To show this country's mindset, Mir Amit, former director of the Mossad, was quoted in a CIA report on December 15, 1986, as saying, Mossad should live by the credo, Israel first, last, and always, end quote. Folks, strap on your seatbelts and get ready to hang on, because I'm here to tell you in no uncertain terms that China is not America's friend, and neither is Israel. I can say that because the Mossad and CSIS, the two most dangerous intelligence forces in the world, have teamed together, and here's what they've been up to. Israel was the first to obtain Los Alamos secrets. Then, in a move beyond forgiveness, they shared this highly explosive information with China, America's greatest threat. As payment, the Chinese gave Israel their latest military secrets to keep them one step ahead of their Arab enemies in the Middle East. Now, I don't know about you. The Mossad and the Chinese Secret Service joining together scares the living hell out of me. Why? Because Israel is the middle. They sided with the United States for decades because we were king of the hill. But now they see China slated to replace us. They're switching their allegiance to them while still sucking vast amounts of U.S. foreign aid out of us. Worse, controllers are drawing us into a god-awful Middle Eastern Israeli-Palestinian war that will A, further enrage Arab and Muslim hatred for us, B, weaken our military forces by spreading them even thinner. Don't forget about India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, etc. C, lead to further economic disaster. The more money we borrow to fuel our war machine, the more money we need to pay back in interest. If you think for a second that Israel is our friend, you're seriously deceiving yourself. Israel cares about one thing and one thing only, Israel. Think about it. Would an ally hire Jonathan Pollard, a civil senior analyst at our top secret Navy Field Operational Intelligence Office in Suitland, Maryland, to steal our intelligence reports? As Thomas wrote in Seeds of Fire, in the time he had spied for Israel, Pollard read and copied and transmitted every worthwhile secret the United States possessed. Keep this sentence in mind, for it reiterates what the CIA's George Tenet said. Pollard stole every worthwhile intelligence secret we have, end quote. Think about this for all of our secrets. And they've recently joined forces with the CSIS and are exchanging information with them. The keys to the S4 Area 51 are now in the hands of our most dire enemy, China. It's so bad. It all started with a software program created by William Hamilton called PROMIS, Prosecutors Management Information Systems. And that was designed to share information between various databases and to also track information from other databases by tapping into them. Hamilton has the ability to track every citizen in the United States by accessing their personal data files. The barest details of their lives would be sufficient. A birth certificate, marriage license, driver's license, or employment record. PROMIS was obviously a powerful piece of software with the potential to be so all-encompassing and octopus-like in its reach that Deputy Attorney General Lowell Jensen labeled it one of the greatest discoveries of this century, end quote. Realizing its benefit as an intelligence tool, the LACM, operating out of Israel's Ministry of Defense, and even more secretive than the Mossad, sent the most notorious spy in the world, figure in setting up the Iran-Gate arms for hostages deal, obtained a copy of the enhanced Promise software, then presented it to Lakem programmers who deconstructed it. The software was then sold to Secret Service agencies, terrorists, and financial centers all over the world. There's only one catch to this story. Granted that such an undertaking was not only blatantly illegal on Israel's part, it was also a betrayal against the U.S. In no uncertain terms, the Israelis also one final trick. After ripping the enhanced prompt software apart, they installed a trap door before putting it back together to allow them to have any information in the host system that was using it. Do you know what that means? Say, for instance, this software was installed on a computer. Because of the back door that nobody knew about when they illegally bought it, the Israelis could see every file on your computer. Every one. So when the Israelis began selling the stolen software on the black market, one would wonder why they'd lay such a golden egg into the laps of their enemies. Spy on everything their adversaries were doing. And to whom were they selling it? To name a few, the IRA, England's MI5, with a wealth of financial data, the Soviet Union's military intelligence, Germany's Secret Service, BND, and last but not least, the Chinese government, which was intent on breaking into our labs at Los Alamos and unearthing all of our military secrets. Also was Sandia Labs, where we arm our nuclear subs and also do research into time travel and teleportation. Once again, Israel and China are in cahoots to undermine the United States. The man who sold the doctored enhanced Promise software to China's Secret Service was none other than publishing tycoon Robert Maxwell. He was also instrumental in selling this program to spy agencies all around the world before he got knocked off for talking to and not being able to meet his financial obligations. Do you remember him drowning after falling off his boat a few years ago? The controllers have a way of eliminating those who become a problem. Understanding the ramifications of Israel's role in supplying this stolen, doctored, illegal software to shady organizations all over the world that they and only they benefited from is crucial. A ruling by the U.S. Congress Judiciary Committee declared in no uncertain terms, a foreign power, the State of Israel, has been engaged in active espionage against the United States by the illegal use of enhanced Promise software. What makes this matter even more appalling is that the powers that be in our own country knew the Trojan horse was installed in the back of this software that was sold to spies, criminals, and governments across the world. This invariably leads back to the Israeli Secret Service and our nation's silence, where we made no attempts to prosecute. Truly sickening. John Cohen of the House Judiciary Committee summed it up when he said, "There is a putrid stench that reaches across party lines in Washington and involves cover-ups by various and foreign governments, especially Israel's. Though tens of millions of dollars have been spent investigating the Inslaw affair, they have all failed for one reason only. Very powerful people want the truth to get out." And what is the truth? Well, we'll get to that in time, but before that, it's important to realize how world government operates on a daily basis. It isn't by the selected leaders that the controllers put into office. It's the secret societies and intelligence agencies that really make the world go round. Mir Amit, former Director General of the Mossad, spoke of transitional administrations. They are often only temporary stewards of government. The intelligence community often remains in power for a decade, often longer. To understand that is to see the world in a new way, not the world of elected government, but a far more powerful one, the one that lies beneath. Sean McDade of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, who performed one of the most extensive investigations into this sordid affair, said of the Inslaw scandal in a memo to his superiors in 2000, if U.S. presidential administration will be exposed because of their knowledge and complicity. He then went on to indict Israel. Quote, the Israeli Mossad modified the original stolen software by Rafi Eitan, which was the first backdoor. Later, it became a two-way backdoor, allowing the Israelis access to top U.S. weapons secrets at Los Alamos and other classified installations in the U.S. The Israelis now possess all the nuclear secrets of the U.S. Compared to this espionage coup, it can be categorically stated that the Jonathan Pollard case is insignificant. Folks, this information isn't coming from some schmuck sitting at a bar stool spouting off. These are credible, reliable sources speaking about Israeli espionage that was so severe it made the Jonathan Pollard case pale in comparison. Yes, the Mossad has teamed with China to remove our military secrets, doctored software, backdoors, and misguided alliances. And now our greatest enemy, China, is in the driver's seat due to Israel's complicity. Brief look at the Chinese and see why we should be so suspicious of them. Yeah, this isn't a nation of nice guys. Instead, they're the ones who sold Iraq to develop their hydrogen bomb, specifically large quantities of lithium 6-hydride. But that's not all. They've been dealing arms to Middle Eastern countries for years, and in 1990 alone they sold $300 million worth of military hardware to Syria, Iran, and Iraq. Premier Li Peng even referred to his native China as the new friends of the Arabs. During the Saudis' missiles with a 2,000-mile range, plus brokered silkworm missiles with poison gas warheads to both Iran and Iraq. If you ever wondered where these dirt countries are getting their explosives and weaponry, a good place to start looking, apart from the United States and the People's Republic of China. But an even better indicator of what type of people rule China can be found in the ruthlessly brutal Tiananmen massacre in 1989. If you can remember that fateful event, the students in question only wanted two things: freedom and democratic rule. What did they receive for their efforts? When the Chinese military retaliated, there were 4,000 deaths and 6,500 people wounded on the very first day alone. How did the controller brainwashed politicians and business leaders react to this atrocious massacre and all of China's other appalling human rights violations? Well, they gave them most favored nation trading status and started funneling billions of dollars into their economy. Doesn't this reaction seem odd to you, even downright wrong, especially from a country that supposedly such as equality and rights? There's only one problem, though. The controllers who manipulate our leaders, like George Bush Sr., Bill Clinton, and now Bush Jr., don't give a damn about justice or righteousness. Nah, their only concerns are power, money, and a side dish of war as an appetizer. Society with zero regard for individual citizens. Instead, they view it as a huge untapped economic market waiting to be exploited. In fact, during the last companies and governments have invested untold mega billions into China. Dow Chemicals pumped 50 plant, while AT&T laid out an entire communication system for them. That was pretty nice, don't you think? Especially for a country that holds our values so close to their heart. The primary devil spearheading this traitorous operation is none other than Bilderberg CFR luminary Henry Kissinger, who put billions of dollars into the Chinese economy via his company Kissinger Associates. More than any other American, he has been responsible for promoting investments in China. End quote. Kissinger even created the highly lauded America-China Society with former Secretary of State Cyrus Vance. And guess who was on the board of directors of this association over the years? Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Richard Nixon, National Security Advisors McGeorge, Bundy, Robert McFarlane, and Zbigniew Brzezinski, and former Fort Muskie, Alexander Haig, and William Rogers. Former public officials have such high regard for the best interests of this country. Kissinger Associates influenced their clients to invest in China. There was David Rockefeller's Chase Manhattan that plunked down $270 million for a nuclear power plant at Daya Bay, which was subsequently used to make nuclear weapons. Or how about American Express that fronted $138 million for a Beijing office complex? Or Atlantic Richfield, who laid $170 million for a natural gas field? Aren't you glad these companies are helping a country that steals our military secrets and kills anyone who dares to speak out against them? The most grating aspect of this scenario is our continuing lack of resolve in the face of China standing diametrically opposed to what America is supposed to represent. But instead of completely banishing them economically, it is business as usual, with American companies continuing to pour more money into their coffers. Our intentions towards China was the slaughter at Tiananmen Square. Here is what transpired. George Bush Sr. was getting ready to invade Iraq, but he wanted full support. China was hesitant to give their nod of approval unless they got something in return. So, if the US took a hard line and denounced the brutal murders that took place at Tiananmen Square, the Chinese would not vote in favor of our Iraqi invasion in the UN. In other words, President Bush Sr. sold out in the most different way possible. China outwardly spit on freedom and any hint of democracy. Then we turned around and gave this and the assurance of loans through the World Bank. We also ended all trade restrictions with China, allowing them to enter the World Trade Organization, and welcomed them as part of GATT. This didn't end there. China forwarded to the U.S. information on their military sales to Iraq that our NSA satellites couldn't locate. By January 1991, the Pentagon had the exact location of every Silkworm missile site in Iraq, plus all their other weaponry. In addition, we also knew where the lithium-6 deuteride used for making hydrogen bombs was stored, which, by the way, was sold to Iraq by China from a nuclear power plant in Inner Mongolia. In all, when we invaded Iraq and Saddam Hussein, it was like shooting fish in a bowl, or like adults beating up a more. When the Chinese government was going to stage trials for the students they hadn't already slain, a total mockery of injustice, They didn't want the U.S. to give them any problems over the penalties they doled out, many of which were death sentences. So the Bush administration kept quiet like good little lapdogs, while the rabble-rousers were unmercifully eliminated. Like the old Chinese saying goes, kill one, educate 100. Since over a decade ago, what has transpired? Well, we've helped China improve their satellites and given them the know-how to upgrade their missile guidance systems. We are pretty nice guys, huh? We've also given them advanced aviation data for their jets and fighter planes. Who do you think was behind the scenes acting as the conduit for these deals? At the time, Brewer, a Washington analyst, said Bush's implicit message to companies with a total of many billions of dollars invested in China was very clear. Despite they should regard the situation very much as business as usual. The apologists of Kissinger Associates could not have expressed their positions more clearly than had the president. Enforcing this opinion, the Wall Street Journal reported in September 1989, 3 months after the Tiananmen slaughter, Kissinger Associates could be on the verge of earning hundreds of thousands from a limited partnership set up to engage in joint dealings with CITIC, a merchandise and banking arm of the Chinese government. Three primary favored nation status, trading status. They were Henry Kissinger, Alexander Haig, and Prescott Bush, George's brother. Haig remained a player as chairman of Worldwide Associates Incorporated, a consulting firm with ties to whom? You guessed it, Kissinger Associates. Through these wheelings and dealings, he set up an array of joint ventures with the CITIC, thus keeping the machine rolling. Prescott, on the other hand, was a consultant for Asset Management International Financing and Settlement Limited, where he to invest in joint Chinese-U.S. projects. At this point, please don't think I'm picking exclusively on George Bush Sr. and his crony James Baker. No, this traitorous behavior stretches across party lines and successive administrations. Remember, the controllers don't care about Republican or Democrat. They merely use it to accomplish their goals. As you will see later, beyond words, of bending over backwards to facilitate the Chinese. Jimmy Carter, in office, visited the mainland and suggested that China receive MFN status, which put tariffs on imports into that country at the lowest possible rate. George Bush Jr. administration is packed with devils doing the controller's bidding. What do I mean? Well, look at the former consultants for Kissinger Associates that are currently in the Bush cabinet or on the periphery. First of all, there's Brent Scowcroft, now National Security Advisor, who was formerly the Kissinger Associates Washington office director. Or how about Lawrence Eagleburger in the State Department? Insiders say he's more familiar with the financial interactions between China and America than anyone. Finally, good old James Baker still pops his head up once in a while behind the scenes on orders from George Bush Sr., who no doubt is in direct contact with the controllers. And if you don't think these individuals play a significant role in determining our foreign policy, check out the December 2000 CIA report that says George W. Bush is at best global matters, end quote. At best inexperienced? Do you think the controllers with so much at stake are going to let George W. mess things up for them? Hardly. Since I've mentioned, next to look at a recently released document entitled Global Trends 2015. Here are a few of the CIA's very startling predictions. 1. China's economic growth will be greater than that of all of Europe by the year 2010, while Russia's will only be 1/5 of the United States. 2. China will incite a full-scale trade war by 2010. 3. China will promote various terrorist groups to align and attack the U.S. 4. By 2015, the U.S. will surrender its role as world policeman. 5. By 2015, a major war will break out between the U.S. and China. 6. Finally, a direct quote from the CIA's Global Trends 2015 report. China, as the new superpower of the third millennium, is likely to provide and chemical weapons and suitcase nuclear devices to wage terror against the United States. Yet all of the devils from Kissinger Associates, the Bilderbergs, the CFR, and Trilateral Commission keep telling our government to pump software, hardware, weaponry, computers, and advanced technology into their country. What is going on? We need to wake up quickly, or the hammer is going to drop. What China is doing with the technology we're laying at their doorstep is also very telling in determining what type of society they plan to create. The answer would make George Orwell shudder in his grave. Yes, Big Brother has become such an integral part of China's long-term planning that Gordon Thomas writes, by the year 2001, become like drug addiction in China, end quote. Here is what the Chinese are currently doing and intend to do in the future. Long before 2010, they would like every street in China to be equipped with closed-circuit television. Experimenting with the attachment of microchips to the human brain, once in place, the authorities could use a device that would read a person's mind and relay the information to a computer. As I'm sure you can imagine, this invasion into the deepest realms of our thought process would be the ultimate surveillance weapon. Developing a new radar system that could locate any American stealth fighter plane, Privacy International, human rights group, has reported that any foreigner going to China will be entered into at least 300 different databases, all of which will be interconnected. The traveler's every move will be detailed: emails, laptop activity, room service, financial transactions, phone calls, etc. Everything monitored. Hundreds of thousands of cameras will be installed on buses, trains, and elevators. Residents will essentially be filmed all day long from the time they leave their home. All public buildings, roads, and apartment complexes will also be staked out with cameras, and new housing projects will have seeing eyes in every room. The Chinese government's ultimate goal is to monitor people every second of the day from birth to death. Much of this activity arising from technology either purchased or stolen from the United States. Thomas ultimately says, in China, surveillance is an integral part of pacification, intimidation, obfuscation, propaganda, and control. Most pernicious form, surveillance is used for behavior modification, including adverse conditioning. Thomas also goes on to say that by the year 2020, artificial intelligence will be in full swing, with robots becoming an essential part of the Chinese culture, not only as a part of the workforce, but also as observers and snitches. Not only is Chinese intelligence obsessed with obtaining America's deepest technological defense and computer secrets, but they also continue to help Saddam Hussein upgrade his defense network. China is also among the top 2 purchasers of Russian arms and reach a peak of $2.7 billion in weapons sales in 1999. with the volatile country of Pakistan, which was recently on the brink of nuclear war with India, being its primary buyer. Their role is so troublesome that the New York Times on August 20th, 2001, quoted the Conventional Arms Transfers to Developing Nations 1993 to 2000 report published by the Congressional Research Service, saying, China can present an important obstacle to efforts to stem proliferation of advanced missile systems to some areas of the developing world where political and military tensions are significant, end quote. Chinese society that Thomas best captures is the difference in outlook between the Chinese and Americans. According to Thomas, the Chinese machine does not care about truth or public propaganda, but are much better and more comfortable with censorship and propaganda. Nor do they cater to or create media hysteria when an event takes place. Instead, they simply stand back and observe, then take notes and wait. They lunge forward and strike. Thomas writes, at the core of the machine, its intelligence, its propaganda, its military leaders, its politicians, is one belief. It despises America's fear of casualties. America enters a war from Korea and Vietnam to Afghanistan, or needs to remedy a situation, they always worry about. Chinese don't place such emphasis on human. Although America has an array of sophisticated weaponry, they're afraid of death. According to them, they're soft. That's why the Chinese admire the Israelis. In their view, hold the same lack of regard for death. The individual does not hold as much importance as does the society or nation. Thus, the Chinese and Israelis are linked once again, which brings us to the infamous drowning of an American spy plane in May 2001. When this event took place and was plastered across the daily newspapers, guess who the Chinese invited and promised full access to inspect the plane and all its sophisticated secrets? A team of Israeli technicians was secretly flown to Hainan Island, where the plane was disabled. Do you see a pattern evolving? But Chinese subterfuge toward the U.S. doesn't end there. On the day of 9/11, the day America was horrendously attacked, guess what the Chinese were doing? People's Liberation Army planes landed in Kabul, Afghanistan, and on board were a team of defense contractors, Secret Service members, and some senior Army officers. This was on September 11, 2001. And why did they arrive there? To sign contracts giving the Taliban state-of-the-art electronics defense equipment, plus advanced and missile tracking systems that help bring these terrorists into the modern age. Does this action sound like one carried out by a trusted ally of the United States? Hell no. Viciously attacked. Up until then, the Taliban was nothing but a ragtag operation with a total of 150 tanks, 15 helicopters, 20 bombers, and a few old Russian Kalashnikov rifles. That was it. But lo and behold, China invaded them. So the Taliban received military equipment in return for a promise that the Muslim fundamentalists would not attack their mainland. Here is another little tidbit of information that might catch your interest. It seems Bill Clinton almost performed one of the few courageous acts by considering to put a hit on Osama bin Laden following the attack of our embassy in Nairobi. But the assassination was foiled because bin Laden had been tipped off. by the CIS. Bin Laden also made several trips to China in the years preceding 9/11. But please don't smile favorably on Bill Clinton. Along with Henry Kissinger and the Bush family, our former president is right up there when it comes to aiding and abetting the Chinese. Here are a few quotes. General Accounting Office, June 19, 1998. President Clinton issued waivers on military items valued at $36.3 million and licensing of commercial military exports worth $313 million. Jeff Garth, New York Times, October 19, 1998. On how nearly $2 billion in annual trade has been removed from federal scrutiny. The Pentagon was traditionally the strongest voice against technology exports, and Clinton made several appointments calculated to change the culture. The former president said at the time, "One reason I ran for president was to tailor export controls to the realization of a post-Cold War world." Cox Report. The thrust of this report revolves around how the Clinton administration helped China get more technology and conveniently paved the way for them to steal and engage in espionage against this country. As Oklahoma Senator James M. Imhoff notes, in the Cox Report points out, nuclear espionage by China is only one part of the problem. China's effort to acquire U.S. military-related technology is pervasive. Operating through a maze of government and quasi-government entities and front companies, China has established a technology-gathering network of immense proportions. They are willing and able to trade, bribe, buy, or steal to get U.S. advanced technology. Their success is often determined largely by our willingness to make it easier for them to get what they want. The following items come from the Hansen case, a trifle compared to Clinton-China connection, written by Sam Smith for Newsmax.com on February 22, 2001. Commerce Secretary Ron Brown allowed American-made engines to be sold to China to put into their cruise missiles. The only problem is this was strictly military equipment. But that didn't matter. Brown got around this little snag by reclassifying all the engines as civilian. New York Times. Clinton took over $2 billion worth of items that we exported to China off the list of things that could come under inspection by our national security forces. This included nearly 80 supercomputers that could unscramble classified data and also design nuclear weapons. Many of these items were ultimately used by China's military, yet the Clinton administration refused to allow a peep of scrutiny here in the U.S. President Clinton signed national security waivers to let 4 U.S. commercial satellites be set into orbit by the Chinese, even though China knowingly was exporting nuclear and missile technology to Iran, Pakistan, and other terrorist countries. Conclusion to the Hansen case. Very important. The brunt of evidence was that the Chinese had obtained more past 2 decades than had all the previous spies in American history put together. And on all nuclear weapon systems. They got our most advanced supercomputers, and they gained extraordinary important information about satellite systems. Some of this knowledge they used for themselves. Some they retrofitted and repackaged and sold to other countries like Iraq, where it is used against our own fighter planes. Smith continued, while the problem occurred under both Republican and Democratic administrations, it got completely out of hand under Clinton. A stunning proportion was obtained either as a direct result of political and economic decisions by the Clinton administration or as a result of what can best be described as premeditated indifference. Can you see what's going on? The Bush administration plus Clinton's dog and pony show are mere puppets, facilitators who implement decisions from above to prepare China for their showdown with the United States. This is scary stuff, folks. And you may be wondering, when are they going to strike? The answer is simple: whenever. They need to get them ready. More and better U.S. technology. Isn't it obvious? We who are allowing the controllers to dig our own graves, and while all this occurs, China waits silently, the ultimate perpetrator, as Gordon Thomas calls them, holding America in contempt for one thing: being too soft. And do you know what? If we keep allowing this atrocity to take place, the Chinese are right. We are too soft because we are not doing any preparations for our own demise. It's like your next door neighbor pointing guns, cannons, bazookas, missiles, and bombs at your house, and you just sit there watching it happen, wondering, I wonder if they're going to attack us. Well, you're damn right they're going to lay siege upon you, and if something isn't done to stop it, who is ultimately to blame? We are, for allowing it to happen. #27. Artificial Intelligence, the Final Conspiracy. Before I delve, they are the ones calling the shots, while the implementers we see on TV are merely actors filling a role on stage. I'd like to examine one last time a major problem facing this country: foreign aid. The first thing this nation stop all foreign aid at once to everyone and re-examine our overseas policy. Look at what we do for while they steal our technology and sell it to the Chinese. 30% of all U.S. foreign aid goes to Israel, totaling $3 billion, $1.2 billion for economic aid, and $1.8 billion in military billion a year in federal loan guarantees, which comes to a grand total of $5 billion per year, or $13.9 million per day. Plus, our total aid to Israel from 1949 to date is approximately $96 billion, and this to the 16th wealthiest nation on earth. It's ridiculous, especially when there isn't the slightest inkling of peace in the Middle East. I have an idea. Why not give this money to American citizens instead? But you see, the controllers don't give a damn about Americans, or for that matter, Jewish or Chinese or Russian or African citizens either. Why not? Because now the future of mankind on this planet can be found in artificial intelligence. Are you able to see how this phenomenon has turned full circle? It all began with America's artificial intelligence experiments at Area 51 and other labs. Then, how the Israelis stole our technology, referred to as nuclear secrets, and sold them to the Chinese. The controllers' ultimate goal is America with the Chinese as the world's next superpower. Then begin the process of creating artificial beings on a large scale. And why, you may wonder, is America being usurped by the Chinese? It's simple. Americans are still plagued by annoying concepts such as justice, freedom, self-determination, will. The controllers are worried that Americans will not tolerate manning assembly lines where robots are created that will eventually take over this planet. And if America won't assume the lead on a global scale or pull off this coup, how will the rest of the world follow? They won't. But here's the continuity valve. Their final step in a ghastly Hegelian dialect. Thesis: America. Thesis: China, communistic, controlled. synthesis, New World Order, Big Brother, robotic surveillance. I'm sorry, subservience. Isn't it becoming clear? To hell with George Orwell's 1984 mind-controlled humans. The controllers are going one step further by completely eliminating free will altogether, or nearly so, by creating a being that's entirely incapable of experiencing such a concept. The machine. This is it, folks, the final piece to the puzzle. The last line of the stage play, the final conspiracy. And of incentives are driving this phenomenon. First, the controllers, as their name none too subtly implies, are beings, thus are objects to be controlled. But, you see, this control can't be absolute, or it would take all the fun out of the game. The controllers want some degree of resistance just to keep the stage play interesting. I liken them to cats that catch a mouse. Of course, the feline could kill the little rodent in a heartbeat, but what do they do instead? They torment, toy with, and torture the mouse for hours on end, batting it around, throwing it up in the air, letting it run away, only to capture it again or trap it in a corner. I know this. My cats play this game all the time. The same rationale applies to the controllers. They don't want completely mind-numbed robots beneath them, because then there'd be no hunt, no chase, no thrill of mastery and control. Then again, the thought of people rising against them, the masses, scares the hell out of them. Even though only a few handful of people control 40% of the world's wealth, there's still that little problem of people getting sick of their shenanigans. And if we ever did stage a bloody, murderous, don't allow one controller to live revolution, guess where they'd be? Dead and buried, bloody, beaten pulps of mangled flesh and bone, nothingness. They'd be destroyed. Death leads us to the flip side of the coin and the final step in every conspiracy since the beginning of time: immortality. Realistically, if you can control money, politics, and people, and have every material object you desire, what is the only thing beyond your control? Death. And in all honesty, considering the supreme egos of men such as the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, etc., don't think for a second that they don't want to live forever. That's the only obstacle yet to overcome. Before I finish these thoughts, though, I want to delve deeper into the concept of artificial intelligence. Of particular interest is an article in the June-July 2002 issue of UFO magazine entitled "What Are They?" by Richard M. Dolan, author of UFOs and the National Security State. Dolan refers to an observation made by noted biologist Ivan Sanderson, who said in Uninvited Visitors, 1967, that aliens may not actually be fully organic beings, but instead artificial life forms. Think about it. Instead of creatures similar to us who breathe, eat, possess internal organs, and defecate, what if ETs were actually intelligent machines? The concept is, as you'll see, immensely opens the scope of possibilities. Dolan also introduces us to something called singularity, which he defines as when computer intelligence becomes able to upgrade itself to reproduce itself continuously and becomes self-aware. The process involves an increase in computer intelligence, leaving human intelligence in the dust. Are things starting to become clearer? You're reading the future right here. This is where it's all leading. People from many different the next level. Well, folks, this is the next level, except humans aren't going to be a part of the picture, at least as we know them. Gordon E. Moore, chairman of Intel Corporation, came up with Moore's Law in 1965, envisioning that the number of transistors per integrated circuit would double every 18 months in the future. This postulation proved true, for in 1971, the leading integrated circuit had approximately 2,000 transistors. By the new millennium, that number was 42 million. Dolan reinforces the point with this quote: "Once a certain critical mass is achieved in terms of hardware, software, connectivity, and storage, machines will develop the ability to foresee their own technological needs and redesign their software." End quote. This isn't science fiction, folks. This is the stuff that's taking place in hidden facilities like Area 51's S4 and Los Alamos, similar to the Manhattan Project A-bomb that no one knew about until it exploded over Hiroshima and forever changed civilization as we know it. The same type of bombshell is being developed today. You can disregard it like an ostrich with its head in the sand, or else face the reality of our time. This is where we're going. Kurzweil, respected artificial intelligence researcher, says with confidence, "Things are going to move at a pace beyond what we can now comprehend." He adds, "It affects the very nature of human intelligence." We'll see intelligence that's derivative of human intelligence, but superior to it. If the above words are starting to alarm you, it's for good reason. Many authorities on this subject see it being a reality by the year 2040, with the initial phases being implemented as early as the next decade. Dolan characterizes the phenomenon as a godlike level of intelligence residing within machines. I don't know about you, but this concept scares the hell out of me, especially with a ruthless country like China or some evil Project Paperclip type Nazi scientist at the helm. Are you ready to roll over and give these monsters godlike powers? But you see, the controllers are playing this all out like a huge Wizard of Oz drama, throwing us a few carrots to chase as if they're the real thing. Why do you think there's on Area 51 being a flying saucer base? Because it's all a sham. UFOs are only the cover story, a smokescreen. The real story lives with artificial intelligence. Some of you may dismiss this concept as hogwash, saying that humans will always be superior to machines, even if a computer at speeds infinitely higher than us, because in the end, all we have to do is disabled. But what happens when artificial intelligence develops to the point where a machine can walk over and plug itself back in? It might not walk exactly like us, but robots are now able to construct automobiles on an assembly line. Who is to say they won't be able to mobilize themselves enough to plug a simple socket into a wall or recharge their own power supply? Once they attain that level of sophistication, the machines will even be able to create other machines. Yes, machines begetting more machines, each one evolving to a higher level as these very same machines stamp out their own parts in a factory. Far-fetched? Once again, return to the assembly line at a GM factory in Detroit. Hell, to an extent, they're already doing it at a rudimentary level. To combat these self-perpetuation machines, all a human has to do is take a hammer and smash the Frankenstein-like creation to bits, right? I wouldn't find much reassurance in this. Look at Steven Spielberg's AI sometime when the humanoid's face is simply pulled off like a part inside a vacuum sweeper. Then machines will know how to repair. Already know how to do it on other planets. Why not here? Once they reach this stage of development, the machines are literally unkillable. They can't be eradicated. Unlike us, when we have a heart pierced by a sword or a brain blown away by bullets, all they have to do is replace their ruined or destroyed parts. It'll be like ripping out the water pump in your car and putting in a new one. As the nightmare unfolds, two scenarios present themselves. One, science form of advanced machine intelligence. Two, artificial intelligence will become so vast and all-encompassing that at this moment in time, we can't even conceive of where it will lead. Three, Richard Dolan ultimately sees machine intelligence as something that will be so far greater than ours as to be alien. When we see or conceive of aliens, they're really nothing but our future, or a present form that they've already arrived at that is awaiting us in the near future. So instead of being far removed or different, these crafts from outer space are actually what will soon be. There won't any longer be we and they. We'll all be the same once the machines take dominion over the planet. Can you grasp? Aliens are already a form of artificial intelligence. That's why they're able to cross the universe. We cannot. We are not only limited by fossil fuel burning rockets, at least what is presented to us by the government, but our physical bodies are incapable of traveling such distances because of their limitations. To reach Pluto, we need a rocket that was so unbelievably huge just to carry enough food to keep us alive. It would be impractical. When coupled with short lifespans, mortality, intergalactic travel is simply a far-flung notion. But what if a machine were in the pilot's seat instead of a human? That completely changes the entire scenario, doesn't it? Mortality and food consumption are no longer concerns, and once the military and/or NASA break out their next generation of spacecraft, guess what? The controllers will be ready to blast off for the stars. The only drawback is we're not included in those plans. So, when viewed in this manner, the aliens are already advanced beyond us, but the controllers are aware that if they want to survive, travel beyond this planet is the only alternative. In this sense, Dolan observes, the natural course of evolution does not give an unlimited intelligence, but the intelligence necessary to exist within a natural ecosystem. If you are seriously weigh these words, you'll realize that humans have only progressed to a point necessary to survive on the planet Earth. In other words, we've moved forward as far as humans can go. We are able to survive here, at least for the time being. To reach beyond this level, we require a new form of advancement. Dolan's insights hit the nail directly on the head. Here on Earth, he points out, we've adapted to the temperature, gravity, viruses, and elements, but to live elsewhere, we will need to be modified, perhaps so much that the result would be something entirely different. A new species, created with some of our DNA, would probably be the most logical means of sending biological organisms to distant worlds. End quote. Did you notice that the author didn't say humans, but transformed biological entities? Thus, as pointed out earlier, to copy others already traversing the universe, humans will be altered into a form of advanced machine intelligence. And that is exactly what's happening in our top secret labs. Governments won't tell us about these developments for one primary reason. Their plans don't include us lowly humans. The controller's ultimate motives. Here is get into the nitty-gritty of the controller's ultimate motives. The elite desperately need to create a workforce of unquestioning slaves to let them survive the coming cataclysm. Whether it be the arrival of a rogue planet or comet, worldwide viruses, full-scale nuclear war, or global warming to the point of burning us out, the controllers, via access to caches of hidden knowledge, are fully aware that our days on this planet are numbered. Why do you think they've already built scores of underground bunkers all around the country and world and are rapidly constructing new ones in places like Indiana? Is it because of a band of ragtag terrorists from Afghanistan? Hardly. The controllers know that when disaster strikes, the majority of us won't survive. It's happened before to the Mayans, Incas, and on Atlantis. So don't write this scenario off as inconceivable. If it weren't a direct possibility, why would the controllers be building and updating their bunkers with such fervor? Hell, George Bush even admitted to their shadow government preparations in underground bases. Regrettably, once they're inside and the doors are locked, guess who won't have a set of keys to get in? Yep, you and me. Right now, plenty of people are getting themselves in an uproar about mind control, but those are only short-term. Secret Service agencies in a number of countries have experimented with mind control and continue to do so, but when the final conspiracy plays out, there won't be any minds left to control or humans as we even know them. And also developing technologies of mind-blowing proportions, a brave new world is on the horizon, but it's not one that would appeal to us in any way, shape, or form. This is scary. Probably won't see it fully, but our kids and their kids, whatever that means, will. Sexless machines. Yes, sexless. Why would the controllers want us to be distracted with something as gratifying and mundane as sexual thought? Think about how much time humans squander on being horny. The controllers can't have that, especially when we won't even need sexual organs to replicate ourselves. We'll be machine people, and enjoyment, relaxation, or fornication aren't elements of the equation. Someone may protest, I'll think about sex if I want to. What do I mean? Well, picture it as follows. In the future, we are all artificial intelligence creations with robotic machine bodies and computer software minds. The controllers at the helm of all this technology will determine which entities get which software. How do they status? Ask yourself if a class tomorrow, would the controllers send you an invitation to scurry to their underground bunker to survive? If the answer is no, then it's a safe bet they won't receive anything other than standard artificial intelligence slave software. And what does this entail? First of all, a limited amount of accessible memory. A perfect metaphor would be modern-day home computers. If they have 3 gigabytes of memory and become full, nothing else will fit. The same reasoning applies to our future AI software brains. The controllers won't want you to become distracted with thoughts revolving around sex, rebellion, creation, or errant daydreaming. Instead, you'll be a worker, similar to drone bees in a hive. Thus, you'll be programmed to attend work each day where you'll be plugged into or accessed by a central control computer, or C3. C3 will scan you and make sure that only what's supposed to be on your software is there. Concepts like work, and more work. And since you only have a limited amount of accessible memory, nothing else will fit into your software. Even more advanced, author Richard Dolan tells us about a procedure known as mind scan, where an entity probes the person's mind telepathically and sees their innermost thoughts. This might be interpreted as tremendous psychic power possessed by the entity, but such a thing could easily be done by implants within the alien being's brain. Not quite convinced? Out. Right now, chimpanzees can navigate a computer cursor across a monitor by simply using their mind, after, of course, their brain had been implanted with a microchip. This madness is occurring right now. It's barreling forward with frightening speed each day. What if a regime like the Chinese, those with absolutely no respect for human rights or freedom, leaps to the forefront of this movement and gets the controllers' financial backing? What type of future will we know the answer? One that is as unrewarding and unhuman as anyone can imagine. Hand will be among the few to benefit from this societal and technological transformation, considering their elite status. How so? Well, all the rest of us will be slaves with limited software facilities. The controllers will capitalize on every technological breakthrough available to them. I think there's a huge chasm between the haves and the have-nots in the world right now. You ain't seen nothing yet. While the masses will be programmed to complete certain tasks, and that's it, the controllers will tap into virtually infinite amounts of information. And remember, information is power if it is acted upon. But even better for them is the reality of finally becoming immortal. You see, right now, every human being is ultimately reduced to one commonality, a physical body which subsequently results in mortal death. But artificial intelligence will eliminate the curse of physical death, opening the door to an immortal mind. Can you see it? The information from our minds can be downloaded onto a computer program, then installed into an AI body. This mind can virtually live forever. Sure, the physical parts may wear out, but parts of the container can be replaced. The thoughts within will continue indefinitely, thus making the person immortal. Of course, the controllers won't bestow this privilege on everyone. Why should they share their immortality? Do they currently share their wealth, mansions, fancy cars, vacation spots, and knowledge with the rest of us less fortunate people? Hell no. Why would they give us never-ending life if they don't have to, especially if it would somehow threaten their power? Folks, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Controllers are promoting at this moment in time on our planet? The answer, death. Yep, the controllers are behind the management of a death culture that will eventually lay the foundation for our advancement to the AI level. What do I mean by a death culture? Well, look at our global man-made AIDS virus is ravaging a variety of locals in our world. 2/3 of Africa is 35 to 50% infected with the virus, and it is also hitting epidemic proportions in Asia. Nearly 100,000 people die from starvation every day on this planet, even though we have the resources, technology, and money to feed everyone. Then there's a second of war. Iraq, Afghanistan, Israel, and the Palestinians, India, and Pakistan, plus a rash of other localized skirmishes across the globe. If you analyze this situation, where do you think most of our wars are taking place? In the wealthy, affluent countries? Hell no. The wars are being waged in the poor areas. You'd think these downtrodden people could be better served with food, clothes, and medicine, don't you? But what are the controllers forwarding to them? Weapons to kill each other. Can't you see it's a death culture? And as much as I love this country, guess who's by and far leading the way in this sordid endeavor of feeding the war machine? The USA. In fact, during the year 2000, the United States sold $36.9 billion worth of international arms, 68% to underdeveloped or developing countries, and that is up 8% from the year before. Almost $40 billion, $36.9 billion. Half of all weapons market come from U.S. Next highest seller is Russia at $7.7 billion, while China only sold $400 million, 1/90th of dealt. Data from the Conventional Arms Transfer to Developing Nations, 1993 to 2000, published by the Congressional Research Center. I have to ask you, what in God's name are we doing? $36 billion in arms sales and $30 billion the year before, and $30 billion the year before that, and $38 billion the next year, and $38 billion the following year. Think of how messed up our priorities are. Starvation, poverty, that's right, don't register to the controllers. Instead, huge profits are squirreled away in their pockets every year from this appalling practice. War is hell, but war is also sell, and the controllers are behind it. The merchants and death mongers. Peace is a fallacy thing to them. Rather, they want to keep all the little people at each other's throats so they can keep the war machine rolling. And folks, if you think all this war and terror talk in the media is justification for such a disgusting practice, you need to look at the world leaders whose strings are being pulled by the controllers. What if all the secret societies that lurk in the shadows around the globe are actually under the domains of one ruling power? Thomas was able to get such a wealth of information about the Mossad's dealings with the CSIS for his book, The Fire. Do you think it's fathomable that those above him aren't aware of what's going on? No way. All these leaders are part of the same plan, the same script, and are carrying out their roles to further promote the war machine, globalism, and the death culture. John Phillips, author of Vatican Assassins, says in an interview with Rick Martin for the Spectrum newspaper, May 2000, there's no conflict going on with the Arab nations. All of the Arab nations are under the command of Masonic kings or ayatollahs. Saddam Hussein is no enemy of George Bush. Hussein were business partners. Phelps replies, sure, that's why they never killed Saddam. They could have easily killed him. The CIA can kill anybody they want to. They could have easily killed Saddam's own Arab agents there. Saddam was a very important tool. It is not implausible that the death merchant controllers are developing artificial intelligence at our expense to transcend death and become immortal. With virtually unlimited wealth at their disposal and governmental of the human spirit awaits us, with only a few benefiting, if it can even be called that, from the overall scenario. Or, as Richard Dolan says at the conclusion of his article, what are they? Advanced technological entities may indeed be inherently unstable, but it is not so clear that such a condition applies equally to advanced machine intelligence. If Mr. Dolan, as we know it, will be a thing of the past. As I said earlier in this article, there is hope. Reports are filtering out of China that their economy isn't as healthy as the controllers wished it to be. In fact, Gordon Chang stated on June 19, 2002, in the Asian Wall Street Journal that the People's Republic can go from boom to bust in just a few short years. The Newsmax.com article in which this was reported goes on to say that high expectations from the Chinese economy are grossly exaggerated, and China's economic growth is declining and its banking system is in disarray, posing a threat of destabilization to the international economy. Thus, similar to the controllers' grandiose schemes for making Russia into a superpower, China may also prove untenable as a world leader. But it won't be because the international bankers aren't trying. With high unemployment, inflation, a growing deficit, reckless spending, power grabs, and dissatisfaction among the masses, China may not pan out to be such a glimmering diamond in the controller's eye. But we shouldn't gloat yet, for if China or any other world power's economy collapses, the ramifications will be felt globally, especially here. So whether China lives up to the controller's expectations or not, the research and development into artificial intelligence will continue, and the globalist elite will remain the same. Rome is burning, and Noah's building his ark. Will we keep on around as Nero did and disregard the signs of disastrous impending storm, or will we take destiny into our own hands and destroy the controllers? That's what it's going to ultimately take, total destruction. Because if we allow these evil monsters to fulfill their aims, dire consequences await us. Folks, we're not talking any longer about saving this country or control of our minds. No, the very survival of humanity itself is at stake. For if the controllers continue to pursue artificial intelligence, machines will soon replace human beings. Everyone, is this what we really want? It's time to take action. To close this article, I'll quote the heralded author, Robert Anton Wilson. Will allow you to see a light at the end of the tunnel. Every conspiracy collapses eventually because of the psychological likelihood that those who are superlatively clever at deceiving others become equally clever at deceiving themselves. Disinformation eats those who create it. Chapter 29, Big Brother Technology. A boot stomping on a human face. George Orwell, author of the infamous novel 1984, described the horrors of a technological Big Brother future as a boot stomping on a human face. During the past 2 months, it has become increasingly clear that all of us are being transformed into mechanistic cogs that more resemble monitored automations than human beings. This trend fits part and parcel into the controller's overall goals of global dominance and subservience among the masses. To better understand the direction our society is heading, take a look at what has transpired in the year 2002 alone. Implanted computer microchips. For years, the dreaded mark of the beast was spoken about by crazy conspiratologists as proof that Big Brother would finalize his quest for control by injecting us with computer microchips. These miniature devices would carry scores of information about an individual that would be retrieved by scanner-like receivers. Over time, no one would be able to buy, sell, obtain a driver's license, log onto a computer, or be admitted into a hospital without the chip. But nah, that was all paranoia talk. The debunkers and unbelievers said we'd never be implanted with computer microchips that revealed our medical background, family history, financial records, video purchases, brushes with the law, or information about what internet sites we looked at. This wouldn't happen to us. I mean, America is the land of the free. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint all the skeptics, but guess what? The future is now. Applied Digital Solutions recently announced that on April 4, 2002, the FDA granted them permission for the sales, marketing, and distribution of the VeriChip in the United States. Then, on May 10, 2002, at the VeriChip Center in Palm Beach County, Florida, the Jacobs family got chipped with a miniaturized implantable radio frequency identification device. This chip will have a personalized verification number for each recipient, and the information will be stored in a registered database. Now take a second look and let this news sink in. This is the real thing, the dreaded mark of the beast. Folks, this is the beginning of a new era in which we are forfeiting control of our privacy and sovereignty. Now take a second look and let the news sink in. This is the real thing, the dreaded mark of the beast. Folks, this is the beginning of a new era in which we are forfeiting control of our privacy and sovereignty. Sure, at first these companies will make everything sound tame and benign, but beware, I guarantee that more and more information will be stored on these chips, and they'll be required for more and more activities until the day when all human beings will be forced to be injected, probably at birth. Is this the future you want for yourself? Cloning. According to the Reuters news service, on April 24, 2002, Italian doctor Severino Antinori told a television audience there are at least 3 women in the world pregnant with cloned embryos. These impregnations were performed even though the United Nations is supposed to draft a document to ban human cloning. If the controllers are enthusiastically supporting this movement to further their cause of dehumanization, will that resolution be drafted? At this point, we have to ask ourselves, are experiments in biotechnology's conception and creation the direction we want our species to be taking? Cyborgs. On March 22, 2002, Professor Kevin Warwick allowed surgeons at the Radcliffe Infirmary in Oxford, England, to implant 3mm silicone wires into an incision in his left wrist, then attach them to 100 separate electrodes that ran into his median nerve. To perform this first-of-its-kind operation, which cost $715,000, the surgeon sliced into Warwick's forearm, slid connecting wires beneath his skin, then stitched up the incision. These wires will then send and receive radio signals from a device that links the subject's nerves to a computer, where they will be recorded. Warwick says the ultimate aim of this operation is to wire himself up to an ultrasonic sensor used by robots to navigate around objects and to give himself a bat-like sixth sense. The operative word, in my opinion, is robot. Think about it. Email spy technology. One of the most intrusive devices in our modern lives is Carnivore DCS-1000, which uses both hardware and software to read our incoming and outgoing mail, including who sent the message, who received it, the body of the email, and also the message subject. Worse, Carnivore can also monitor everything a computer user has ever downloaded, and also their web searches. It can even go so far as to scan all the electronic traffic from an ISP, Internet Service Provider, more commonly known as a server. I don't know about you, but I don't want the CIA, FBI, National Security Agency, or any other governmental body looking through what I do or listening to my telephone conversations. But that is precisely what is going on right now. and we at Babel Magazine have firsthand proof of it. We know for a fact that our phone is being monitored and our email transmissions are being read, misdirected, or munched. In an article entitled "Stop Carnivore Now," the author says the FBI could, with their electronic wiretapping equipment, ban any language or content found to be objectionable by interception, deletion, or alteration, monitor the country's communications, and target any person who is found or suspected to be a problem. Judge of who or what is a problem, the FBI. Invoke mandatory standards for websites such as a rating system. Shut down or shut off the communications of any one person, website, company, or ISP. The same article continues, a few years down the road when your phone company, your cable TV provider, radio stations, and cell phone company are all part of your ISP and Carnivore DCS 1000 is installed there, the FBI will have exclusive control of what you can and can't watch, say, or do while using these technologies. The author concludes, one of the great powers of the Internet is the fact that it exists beyond the control of any person or agency. Ask yourself this question, shouldn't we keep it that way? Wide-scale surveillance. In March 2002, Washington, D.C.'s Mayor Anthony A. Williams told reporters from the Washington Times that the nation's capital must mimic the actions of cities such as Sydney and London in regard to the expansion of its camera monitoring system. Thus, Mayor Williams plans to eventually make D.C. comparable to England, where the government now maintains over 2 million surveillance cameras in city parks, schoolyards, trains and bus depots, intersections, airports, and even in residential neighborhoods. This plan is a prototype to be used all across the country in every city, town, and municipality. Considering that we already have cameras pointed at us in department stores, elevators, lobbies, malls, banks, gas stations, and at many traffic light intersections, we have to ask ourselves how many more are needed to keep an eye on us, not to mention the global tracking satellites that hover above our planet and can photograph you from outer space. Do you want Big Brother? After reading George Orwell's 1984 and Animal Farm and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, many people are overtaken by a sense of dread, yet rationalize the scenario by saying that it's either somewhere down the road in the future or else couldn't possibly happen at all. But considering the above information, which is literally only the tip of the iceberg, not only is Big Brother very close to becoming a reality, some say it is already a reality. If you are still not convinced, rent the movie Enemy of the State with Will Smith, Gene Hackman, and evil Jon Voight and Lisa Bonet. After viewing it, you'll have a pretty good idea what the controllers are capable of. And yet, while all this stuff is happening, we sit back, watch, take it all in, and let it continue. Do we really want Big Brother to know our every move and thought, keep constant vigilance over us, and ultimately stomp his boot into our human face? If we don't take action soon, get ready to start cringing, because those guys are going to start kicking. Chapter 30, The Terminator Gene. Who controls the world's food supply? An overview of Tex Mars' Days of Hunger, Days of Chaos. Food is power. We use it to change behavior. Some may call that bribery. We do not apologize. Catherine Bertini, Executive Director, UN World Food Program. When one thinks about raising crops, the concept seems pretty simple. Farmers plant seeds, tend to them as they grow, then harvest the end result. whether or not it is corn, wheat, or alfalfa. But did you know that less than 20 multinational corporations now own the patents to all the seeds in the world? One of the giants trying to corner or manipulate this market is Monsanto, based in St. Louis, Missouri. A global leader in agricultural biotechnology, Monsanto is now in a position to control the food chain from seed to supper table. A few other companies such as DuPont in Wilmington, Delaware, W.M. Grace, Bayer, Pfizer, and Archer Daniels Midland have placed the entire control of the world's food supply into the hands of a few companies. In fact, the Rockefeller Foundation controls the patents on seeds for 95% of the Earth's major cereal crops. Why should this statistic alarm you? The answer lies in a little publicized technological breakthrough called the Terminator gene. Before delving into the ramifications of this concept, I'd like to present an overview of the food chain as it stands now in the world of corporate farming. To begin with, the above listed companies, along with others in the multinational food network that are maintained by the controller's octopus-like grip, have a virtual lock on what we ultimately consume. To put it in the bluntest terms possible, these companies plant our food, harvest, warehouse, transport, and eventually sell it. Also, an alarming few corporations also own the exclusive patents on many of the seeds sold to farmers. The controllers have quietly assumed such a stranglehold over this vitally important industry. As you'll see below, they essentially hold the powers of life and death in their hands. 1. They set the crop prices via subsidies and market manipulation. 2. Decide who can purchase and sell the various crops through multinational trade agreements and governmental deals. 3. Control the logistics of food transportation by monopolizing the shipping industry, especially trucking, where independent movers have all but been eliminated. What this means is if a farmer decides to buck the system, he can keep growing crops, but he won't be able to find anyone to bring his harvest to market. The controllers have a way of shutting down troublemakers. 4. Create a slew of regulations that hassle small farmers and/or mavericks out of business. 5. Control fertilizer production, which is an essential element of the overall process. 6. Control the seed market via Terminator genes. 7. Control storage facilities, i.e. grain silos. 8. Refuse bank loans to troublemakers while granting them with interest to those who are compliant to their demands. These loans are ultimately under the jurisdiction of such New World Order entities as the Federal Reserve Board, the Bank for International Settlements, the World Bank, European Monetary Institute, and the World Trade Organization, among others. The United Nations is also fighting for the ability to levy a world tax, not only on certain wealthy nations, but also on individuals as well. Proceeds will be used to pay for a variety of UN, World Bank, and IMF programs. Thanks a lot. 9. Become more influential on a daily basis with the establishment of corporate farms as opposed to individually owned ones, and their dominance of meat packing and processing plants. 10. Manipulate agricultural statistics to paint whatever picture they deem necessary, thus never allowing us to truly see where we stand. Read George Orwell's Animal Farm to understand how numbers are continually used to deceive people. 11. Use satellite technology to monitor the farms and fields. 12. Develop weather modification. 13. Ship American food overseas, thus raising prices domestically. To really gain control of the food chain, one needs to start at the crux of it all, with the seeds. This is how the cowardly, clandestine shadow dwellers have ultimately decided to control the world's food supply. Instead of a traditional farmer taking the seeds that he got from his current crop and saving them to be used the following year, now we have the hybrid seeds that have been introduced to the farming industry over the years, which produce stronger, higher yielding crops. Over time, farmers didn't see the need to save the old traditional seeds and became reliant upon the genetically altered hybrids. Of course, the patents and ownership of these seeds are in the hands of those companies listed earlier, the monopolists. Ken Corbett stated in the August-September 1994 issue of Nexus magazine that total control of the world's seeds and ultimately the survival of mankind itself is now in the hands of an elite cartel of multinational corporations. What makes this scenario even more terrifying is an earlier mentioned entity called the terminator gene, which is a bioengineered element that mutates a seed's genetic structure, rendering the seed barren and unable to reproduce itself. In other words, the altered seed will produce a crop, but for only 1 year, and will not reproduce again the following year. Thus, in order to get new seeds, the farmer must go to the corporation that owns the patents on these transformed, genetically altered seeds. These seeds only produce one time because of the built-in terminator gene that gives all control to those who own the patents. Here is the trade-off. Farmers are sold high-tech seeds that are sure to produce high-volume crops and can easily stave off disease. In return, they have to go back to their seed companies every year and buy more seeds rather than stockpile them because of the internalized terminator gene. Can you see how this situation places every farmer on the planet in a perilous position? What if they do something to enrage the powers that be or buck the system? What happens? Those in control simply refuse to sell them more seed. Don't you just love the controllers and how they always have our best interests in mind? To create further dilemmas, the Plant Breeders' Rights Act states that anyone who breaches these patents or refuses to pay royalties on them could face a 6-month prison term and/or a $250,000 fine. Jerry Guidetti, in a July-August 1998 Jubilee newspaper article entitled "Seed Terminator and Mega Merger Threaten Food and Freedom," says, "Never before has man created such an insidiously dangerous, far-reaching, and potentially perfect plan to control livelihoods, food supply, and even survival of all humans on the planet." She continues her article by declaring widespread global adoption of the newly patented Terminator technology will ensure absolute dependence of farmers on multinational corporations. Jim Hightower, former Texas Secretary of Agriculture, adds, "In their latest scheme, government scientists and corporate profiteers have teamed up to mess up one of nature's basics, seeds. The geniuses at USDA have used our tax dollars to develop a seed that will not germinate when replanted. Who would want such non-germinating seeds? The seed corporations, of course, since it means every farmer in the world would have to come to them and buy new seeds." So, what does this all mean? In simplest terms, the terminator gene has now placed total control of the world's food supply into the hands of the New World Order. It's that plain and simple. To show the dangers of this situation, I'll close this essay by providing a few quotes from various public and governmental officials that will reinforce the points Mr. Mars made in his book. They will also show the true aims of the New World Order and how farms in the future will be seen as nothing more than serfs, peasants, and sharecroppers. In addition, the very survival of our race is now in the hands of a few devils who truly don't care about our welfare. If we don't buckle to their demands and act as they wish us to act, ultimately to be implanted with microchips, they could conceivably cut off our food supply and starve us to death. If this ever happens, we need to ask ourselves a question: who will keep getting food and continuing to live a life of leisure, us or them? And just remember, the New World Order isn't right around the corner. It's already here. Are you ready to welcome it with open arms? Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of State at a Bilderberg meeting in the 1990s, said, "By controlling energy, we can control nations, and by controlling food, we can control individuals." Pope John Paul II, as quoted by Father Malachi Martin, declared in Keys of This Blood, "By the end of this decade, we will all live under the first one-world government that has existed in the Society of Nations, a government with absolute authority to declare the basic issues of human survival and human prosperity." Dr. Carol Quigley wrote in Tragedy and Hope, "There does exist an international network whose aim is to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world." Al Gore, former vice president, "We're continuing to have our spy satellites in the sky. They're there to help us. What we're doing is mapping and monitoring the entire world, including every square inch of the United States." Larry Bates wrote in the New Economic Disorder, "I have said for many years that the term New World Order is merely a code word for one world socialism, with an elite ruling class to govern the rest of us under their demonic system." Dwayne Andrews, Archer Daniels Midland chairman, said, "People in the Midwest do not understand. This is a socialist country." John G. Gordon wrote in Veritas newspaper, July 1996, "Rules made by the World Trade Organization made it illegal for the U.S. To retain sufficient supplies of grain for emergencies. The U.S. was compelled to sell our grain reserves to the rest of the world. The sad reality of all this is that Americans in the land of the free, which feeds the world over 80% of its food, could actually starve to death while the rest of the world eats." Congressman Louis McFadden, chairman of the House Committee on Banking and Currency, in the 1940s said, "The Depression was not accidental. It was a carefully contrived occurrence. The international bankers sought to bring about a condition of despair so that they might emerge the rulers of us all." Finally, Larry Bates tells us in The New Economic Disorder about a visit to the United Nations. "I couldn't keep still any longer and I blurted out, intending to be facetious, 'Why don't you just take everybody's money, checking accounts, savings accounts, bonds, real estate, and all their other assets, and just put everything in one big pile and redistribute it to everybody in the world?' Our United Nations guide replied, 'A very good idea. It's what we are trying to do here.'" In the same vein, former President Bill Clinton stated at a news conference in Argentina on September 19, 1997, "What I am promoting is the reorganization of the world." Conclusion. Here is one final observation. I don't want Bill or Hillary Clinton reorganizing anything in my life and world. The big question is, do you? Chapter 31, Chemtrails over Happy Valley. On the morning of April 8, 2002, from 6:20 a.m. to 7:30 a.m., Lisa Giuliani and I counted 11 different chemtrails being sprayed above the skies of State College, Pennsylvania. The culprits of these thick white plumes were military jets flying at approximately 40,000 feet. This is a regular alarming occurrence that we witness nearly every single blue sky day in State College for the past few months. What are chemtrails, you ask? In order to understand this phenomenon, one must first be familiar with contrails or condensation trails, which are the pencil-thin white lines we have all seen following in the wake of airplanes. These consist of water vapor and are harmless. Chemtrails, on the other hand, are much thicker and expand across the sky to form X's, O's, and grid patterns. While normal contrails last for less than a minute, chemtrails linger for several hours. As chemtrails puff and spread out, they form a thick white haze that blankets and obscures the sky. This is not simple skywriting above our heads. Instead, it is a deliberate contamination of our atmosphere by the government for reasons that have not been forthcoming to us. Have any of you noticed that whenever we have a blue sky day in State College, there are soon military jets flying overhead, spreading these white trails? Then the sky becomes whitish, a thick haze forms, and voila, no more blue sky. The chemtrail issue has not been reported by the mainstream media. However, it has been addressed by Representative Dennis Kucinich of Ohio, who is in charge of the Armed Services Oversight Committee. He has confirmed the existence of chemtrails and sought to ban them in Section 6 of his House Resolution Bill 2977. Also, the U.S. Air Force states that chemtrails are being used as part of a program involved with aerial obscuration. The reason Kucinich wants to ban chemtrails is because they are composed of biological and chemical ingredients that have detrimental physical effects on people, animals, and the environment. Many concerned citizens nationwide have become ill following chemtrail spraying in their areas. We too are concerned because chemtrails may be aggravating or instigating drought conditions here and nationwide due to their stearate component, which soaks up much of the available moisture in areas that are sprayed. Yet our attempts to address this issue with AccuWeather expert senior meteorologist Ken Reeves, both Pennsylvania state senators, and the EPA have been futile. There is cause for concern with respect to this aerial spraying of the population, as those responsible for it have not stepped forward and informed the public as to what is actually going on. Despite repeated requests from concerned citizens nationwide, including independent researchers, journalists, and scientists, no answers are being given. Please note, spraying of uninformed and unconsenting populations is illegal and in violation of the Nuremberg Code and the Environmental Modification Treaty, which the United States signed in 1977. According to William Thomas, one of the first published reporters to break the chemtrail story, there is zero doubt that chemtrails are an ongoing military operation. Renowned author Jim Marrs spoke of chemtrails in the April 7th issue of Babel magazine. There is absolutely no question that someone is spraying chemicals into the air that we all breathe. There is even legislation in Congress attempting to outlaw chemtrails, even while government spokesmen deny it is happening. Therese Einer, CES consultant and accredited environmental expert engineer, has analyzed rainwater samples and confirmed that the unusual test results are directly connected with chemtrail aerial spraying. In her results, she determines the contaminants would have had to be delivered in large amounts and in concentrated form. Ms. Einer also states, if you look at each one of the parameters, there is consistency here. This would indicate a very controlled delivery dispersion of chemtrails by aircraft in your area. Test results show the presence of elements that would not normally be present in rainwater, including barium and aluminum. The official findings can be found at www.carnicom.com. This is not merely a matter of concern to us in the center region. The spraying activity is occurring all over the United States, as evidenced by the national database known as Chemtrail Tracking USA, which monitors and documents all reported chemtrail spraying. The public does not need to be coddled and protected from the truth, whatever the truth may be. The citizenry has a right to be made fully aware of what is being sprayed into the air they breathe. Individual citizen testimonials to Chemtrail Tracking USA and also to Chemtrail Central, both sites are accessible via the internet, cite scores of people reporting ill physical effects following chemtrail activity. Symptoms include, but are not limited to, persistent hacking coughs, upper respiratory and intestinal distress, lethargy, extreme fatigue, pneumonia, dizziness, disorientation, severe headaches, aching joints, nosebleeds, diarrhea, bloody stools, depression, anxiety, nervous tics, loss of bladder control, and dry or burning areas of exposed skin. Chemtrails, frequently asked questions by Tony Thayer, Executive Director of Blue Skies International. Those with compromised immune systems, the elderly, the young, and those in poor physical conditions are the first to feel the chemtrail effects. Did you know, 1, the United States Air Force has a program called Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather, by 2025. This program details the military applications of weather modification. 2, in his book Uncommon Sense, author George Humphrey states that on April 5, 2001, the Senate, with almost no publicity, approved $4.5 billion to restore funds for climate change programs. 3, in a Babel magazine interview with researcher Jim Marrs, we posed this question to him: what is your position on the chemtrail issue, hoax or not? If we are being inundated by chemtrails, what is the ultimate purpose behind this widespread spraying? Mr. Marrs responded, this should be a major issue for the American public, as there is absolutely no question that someone is spraying chemicals into the air that we all breathe. There is even legislation in Congress attempting to outlaw chemtrails, even while government spokesmen deny it is happening. There are several theories about what this program is all about. Everything from mind control to trying to decrease the effects of global warming in order to save the insurance industry, whose collapse could bring down the entire U.S. economy. But none of these theories have yet been proven. It may well be a combination of purposes. The only real fact is that respiratory disease have increased significantly since the chemtrails began appearing 4 or 5 years ago, as America has been dumbed down. 4, Representative Dennis Kucinich of Ohio, who heads the Armed Services Oversight Committee in charge of chemtrail projects for climate control and over-the-horizon radar radio conduction, introduced House Resolution 2977 that sought to ban chemtrails and other exotic weapons. So we respectfully and urgently ask the Center Daily Times and all State College citizens to research the chemtrail issue as we've presented it here and become informed regarding the ongoing aerial spraying being conducted above our heads. We deeply believe this is a matter of grave importance that needs to be confronted and should not be ignored by either the media or the residents of State College. Our air is the most important resource to sustaining life. We must demand accountability, and we must do it now. Of course, there are many other questions to be answered, such as who is manufacturing these chemicals and where the military jets are originating from. So please look up the next time there is a blue sky day and notice what is happening. Then take photographs and ask questions. Meanwhile, as we continue with our lives, we are all engaging in one similar activity. We are all breathing, breathing, breathing. Chapter 32, Notes and Quotes, Mind Control. Dr. Jose Delgado on invisible weaponry. More dangerous than atomic destruction, with knowledge of the brain, we may transform, we may shape, direct, and robotize man. I think the great danger of the future is that we will have robotized human beings who are not aware they have been robotized. Sirhan, under hypnosis after supposedly assassinating Robert Kennedy. Practice, practice, practice. Dr. Diamond, practice what? Sirhan, mind control, mind control, mind control, mind control. Howard Rowan, Techno Spies, 1978. Computers that can communicate with the brain may help people in all sorts of intellectual tasks. A tiny terminal implanted in a person's brain would give him access to giant computer banks. For instance, and with the miniaturization of computers, an actual computer could be implanted in the brain. From the individual's viewpoint, it would become part of his brain, extending his knowledge and memory immensely. 1972 ARPA report to Congress. The long-sought goal is direct and intimate coupling between man and the computer. Army Classified Report, 1972. It is possible to field a truck-portable microwave barrier system that will completely immobilize personnel in the open with present-day technology and equipment. DIA Report, 1976. Pulsed microwaves can carry sounds and possibly even words, which appear to be originating intracranially. The London Times, October 17, 1994. Bionic man comes of age over the past decade, the Times reported. More than 15,000 people worldwide have had electronic components implanted into their brains. In a procedure confined until recently to the fantasies of science fiction, microchips are now being routinely placed beneath the skull into brain stems. In many cases, these devices are connected to platinum wires, which are fused and buried in the brain. Dr. Wayne Evans, Army Institute of Environmental Medicine. In a sense, we are in the same ethical and moral dilemma as the physicists in the days prior to the Manhattan Project. Those of us who work in this field see a developing potential for a nearly total control of human emotional status. Mae Brussel, 1974. Many of the current rash of senseless killings, massacres, and zombie-type murders are committed by individuals who have been seen in army hospitals, mental hospitals, or prison hospitals, where their heads have been literally taken over surgically to create terror in our community. Dr. Corydon Hammond, professor at the University of Utah's School of Medicine, 1993. The CIA's cult mind control techniques were based upon those of Nazi scientists recruited by the CIA for Cold Warfare. Researcher Lenny LePon estimates in Mass Murderers in White Coats that 5,000 Nazis resettled in the United States after World War II. MKUltra, areas of interest. The modification of human behavior and perception through chemical means, the creation of a truth serum, sensory deprivation, religious cults, microwaves, psychological conditioning, psychosurgery, drug experimentation, brain implants, radiation, electroshock, torture, continuous noise, white noise, biological weapons, psychic research, etc. MK Ultra atrocities between 1953 and 1957. Doctors at the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston injected at least 11 terminally ill cancer patients with uranium-235. During the 1940s, pregnant women were given cocktails of radioactive material in order to study effects on their fetus. At the Fernald School of Waltham, Massachusetts in 1947, 17 retarded teenagers were given radioactive contaminated meals. In 1962, an Ivy League research team fed radioactive iodide to 760 mentally retarded children, some as young as 1 year old, from 1944 to 1961. Entire communities in New Mexico were doused with radioactive lanthanum via open-air experiments. Between 1963 and 76, 67 prisoners at a northwestern prison had their testicles exposed to ionizing radiation. The United States government carried out radiation experiments in at least 33 veterans hospitals. Sensory deprivation tests conducted by Dr. John Lilly in 1956. Volunteers were immersed in a tank of lukewarm water. The subjects had to wear a particular type of face mask, enabling them to see only blurred light. Under total silence and lack of any stimulation, the subjects suffered mental disturbances. The maximum a volunteer could tolerate these conditions was only 3 hours. The volunteers reported feelings of unreality and a tremendous loss of identification. They did not know where they were, who they were, or what was happening to them. Due to this enormous mental pressure, most of them abandoned the experiment. Jose Delgado and the Charging Bull. Delgado demonstrated the potential of his stymo-sievers by wiring up a full-grown bull. With the device in place, Delgado stepped into the ring with the bull. The animal charged towards the experimenter and then suddenly stopped just before it reached him. The powerful beast had been stopped with the simple action of pushing a button on a black box held in Delgado's hands. Dr. Jose Delgado, 1966. My experiments support the distasteful conclusion that motion, emotion, and behavior can be controlled by electrical forces, and that humans can be controlled like robots by pushing buttons. He further suggested that there would become a time when brain control could be turned over to non-human operators by establishing two-way radio communication between the implanted brain and a computer. Lincoln Lawrence, describing radiohypnotic intercerebral control, RHIC. It is the ultra-sophisticated application of post-hypnotic suggestion triggered at will by radio transmission. It is a recurring hypnotic state, reinduced automatically by the same radio control as the individual is brought under hypnosis. This can be brought into play under many guises. He is then programmed to perform certain actions and maintain certain attitudes upon radio signal. Charles Hoy Fort. Almost all people of all eras are hypnotics. Their beliefs are induced beliefs. The proper authorities saw to it that the proper belief should be induced, and people believed properly. Michael A. Hoffman II. Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare, 1989. The most amazing thing about the American people is that they are constantly defending their worst betrayers. Who then is modern man? He is a mind-bomb patsy who gets his marching orders from Twilight language, key words sprinkled through his news and current events. Even as he dances to the tune of the elite managers of human behavior, he scoffs with great derision at the idea of the existence and operation of a technology of mass mind control emanating from the media and government. Modern man is much too smart to believe anything as superstitious as that. Michael A. Hoffman II. Flattery, 1989. The first principle of mind control. Why then does he revere him? Because they flatter him. This is the first secret of mass mind control and can be observed as the foundation stone of virtually every false religion, party, cult, philosophy, system, and training. How can modern man free himself when he is told that he is already a demigod, that the problem lies only in finding a pure enough economic or political system worthy of his high-minded brilliance? But if we overthrew them, the controllers tomorrow, we would have to write our own scripts. We would have to heal ourselves. We would have to admit the colossal waste and loss of destruction of the past years which our laziness and folly have made possible. We would have to experience the pain of being alive and responsible. We would have to start acting like men and women instead of as slaves and weaklings. Charles Fort. Man deliberately invented the dogma of materialism in order to shield himself from the evidence of what was being done to him by means of psycho-spiritual warfare methods, hyped by coincidence, symbolism, and ritual. John B. Watson, founder of Behaviorist School of Psychology. Give me the baby, and I'll make it climb and use its hands in constructing buildings of stone or wood. I'll make it a thief, a gunman, or a dope fiend. The possibilities of shaping in any direction are almost endless. Men are built, not born. Zbigniew Brzezinski, 1968, The Technotronic Age. The capacity to assert social and political control over the individual will vastly increase. It will soon be possible to assert almost continuous control over every citizen and to maintain up-to-date files containing even the most personal details about health and personal behavior to every citizen in addition to the more customary data. Dr. G. Brock Chisholm, head of the World Health Organization, 1945, address to psychiatrists and government officials in Washington, D.C. What basic psychological distortion can be found in every civilization of which we know anything? The only psychological force capable of producing these perversions is morality, the concept of right and wrong. The reinterpretation and eventual eradication of the concept of right and wrong are the belated objectives of nearly all psychotherapy. The people who have been taught to believe whatever they were told by their parents or their teachers are the people who are the menace to the world. George Estabrooks, Department of Psychology at Colgate University, research between 1940 and 1945. In 1968, to a reporter from the Providence Evening Bulletin, the key to creating an effective spy or assassin is creating a multiple personality with the aid of hypnosis. Other MKUltra atrocities. Black prison inmates were given LSD for 75 consecutive days. Also, the invention of torture trousers, an electrical torture device made of leather and steel with an electrode fastened to the victim's genitals. Aldous Huxley. There will be in the next generation or so a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude and producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies. James Jesus Angleton, the CIA's counterintelligence director, on the 3 goals of CIA hypnosis programs. 1. The speedy hypnotic induction of unwitting subjects. 2. The ability to create long-lasting amnesia. 3. The implanting of long-lasting, useful hypnotic suggestion. George Estabrooks, I can hypnotize a man without his knowledge or consent into committing treason against the United States. Dr. Jose Delgado. The individual is defenseless against direct manipulation of the brain because he is deprived of his most intimate mechanisms of biological reactivity. In experiments, electrical stimulation of appropriate intensity always prevailed over free will. J.F. Schkopitz, Department of Defense, 1974. The spoken word of the hypnotist may be conveyed by modulated electromagnetic energy directly into the subconscious part of the human brain, i.e., without employing any technical devices for receiving or transcoding the messages, and without the person exposed to such influence having a chance to control the information input consciously. Dr. Chris Winter and a team of scientists at British Telecom's Martlesham Heath Laboratories are developing a chip, Soulcatcher 2025, that, when placed into the skull behind the eye, will record all visual and physical sensations as well as thoughts. According to Winter, this is the end of death. By combining this information with a record of the person's genes, we could recreate a person physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Another of the possibilities of the chip that Winter discussed was the downloading of an older person's entire life experience into a newborn child.